Accidentally hit the pause button. Sorry about that. Yeah, this is part 2 of what if Deku was that I mentored on, or I guess technically let's call it part one. No, part okay, let's call this part 2 of part 1. Anyway, Izuku began to get ready for the entrance exam to start. And as soon as the gates opened, he rushed forward. Before he realized that nobody was following him, and he stopped and turned around to notice that nobody was coming was moving. Before President Mike shouted, "What are you do? What are you doing? There's no countdowns in real life. Go!" Izuku then realized that he was doing the right thing and began running forward again. The first robot he saw was a one-pointer, which he slashed to bits with his electric claws. He whipped several others with his tail and sent out a shockwave, destroying five others around him that tried to get him from behind. On the way, he had noticed a few students that had gotten hurt. One of which was a student with purple hair. He went over to the boy, not saying anything because he couldn't talk, and without asking for permission, bit the boy where he got injured, which at first the boy was startled and kind of mortified, but then he realized that his wounds didn't hurt anymore, and he somehow felt stronger. The boy stared at the dinosaur, which just nodded and then walked off to go attack more robots. Hitoshi Shinzo, which was the boy's name, had seen many things in his life, but never would he have thought to have been healed by getting bitten by a Dimetrodon. Izuku began to rack up more and more points over time, until he felt the ground shaking. He looked down the street he was on to see a giant robot coming at them. Izuku's eyes widened before he then began to run towards the nearest building, sink his claws into the side of it, and climb up at it just as fast as he was running before. He needed to get a vantage point to make sure he can get anybody out of the way who needed it. He didn't really care. He didn't really know there were points for rescuing people, but he still wanted to rescue people regardless. On his way up the building, he noticed that the girl from before, who had tripped and fallen, was about to be crushed by a zero-pointer, so he jumped off the building and rushed forward with full cowling, moving faster than Ingenium can move, thanks to One for All. As he charged at the zero-pointer, the zero-pointer was very close to the girl, but he charged forward and rammed it with his head, making it move back a little bit before he then smashed the rocks that were holding the girl down and picked her up with his mouth gently so that he didn't bite her. He then let her climb onto his back, and she held onto the sail on his back. He began to run with the girl clinging to his sail as he went down an alleyway. The girl climbed off of him, and he noticed that her ankle was hurt. He looked at the ankle for a minute, and then gave it a small bite before the ankle began to heal. Uraraka, which was the girl's name, thinking that the healing abilities that he had was kind of strange. She didn't think anything of it, though, when she felt suddenly a strange surge of power. Izuku did not have his notebook with him at the time, so he couldn't really explain what was going on. But he did know that she had felt the strange surge of power, and a strange nebula-like glow surrounded her. It was pink in color. And as he looked out, he noticed the boy from before, the boy with the purple hair, who was now levitating, and was throwing rocks at the zero-pointer with both his mind and his strength, which was surprising to Izuku. He must have accidentally given a supercharged ability to both of these two. He didn't mind, of course, because he was still kind of helping them. Izuku then noticed that the boy was about to be attacked by some smaller robots from behind, and ran to go help the boy, with the girl following close behind, her now floating as well. But she had touched a few things on the way, and there were a few rocks floating around her, as though she had an orbit around her. The three began to fight the robots around each other, protecting each other, and as well as making sure the zero-pointer didn't hurt anybody else that was in the way. Then President Mike shouted, "Time's up!" All the students immediately stopped fighting, and the zero-pointer stopped moving. After everything had now calmed down, everyone was staring at the three who were clearly the MVPs of the match. They noticed then there was a huge explosion as a beam of light somehow blasted what looked like another zero-pointer's head into the sky before it landed directly in front of the zero-pointer they were all fighting a second ago. Izuku looked at the other zero-pointer head and smelled it for a minute, and then he realized that Bakugo must have blasted the other zero-pointer's head off with his supercharged quirk. Izuku had got the other two's names, and he had gotten a piece of paper to write on, so that he could tell them that he actually couldn't speak to them. They got each other's numbers, which Izuku actually had to use the text feature on his phone because he couldn't actually, talk. And they also got Katsuki's number too. Izuku introduced Katsuki to his two new friends, and they had met up a few times over the time to wait for their letters. The day finally came that Izuku and the others got their letters, to which they all opened them together, which resulted in a lot of random noise. So the three of them paused it, and Izuku played his first, revealing to everybody that All Might was a teacher. Because remember, in canon, he's the only one that knew it first. The four of them had actually tied for first due to how powerful their quirks were at the moment, and how all of them, were good examples of what heroes should be. Aside from Katsuki, who got his rescue points by, accidentally saving some people. Which he didn't know there were rescue points, but he gloated to himself, saying that even when he's not noticing he's rescuing people, he's rescuing people. They decided to celebrate by going to the beach the next day. When they arrived, they noticed that there were a few other people there, just hanging out at the beach, one of which was a family of rather froggy-looking people. It was then that three of the friends looked around and noticed that the dinosaur friend was missing. Katsuki, however, stopped looking around and just stood there for a minute before Uraraka and Shinzo asked where Izuku was, with Katsuki then pointing out to the ocean and saying he went fishing. They then noticed the sail out in the water, poking out of the water like a dorsal fin. Before then, Izuku flew out of the water with a fish in his mouth. It also happened to startle a girl with sea green colored hair, who happened to be nearby when he jumped out of the water with the fish. He didn't notice her and began walking back to his friends with the fish still in his mouth. Izuku then sat down next to his friends and just slurped the fish up in one bite, in one gulp. Katsuki shuddered before asking Izuku how he can even stand eating fish raw like that. Izuku then just wrote in the sand with his claw, saying that it was fine with him because it's just in his Dimetrodon instincts. The girl with sea green hair then approached the four friends, and that they all realized that she was probably one of the members of the family that were family of frog-like people. She also seemed to be around their age, and she introduced herself as Suyu Asui. They all introduced themselves too, with Izuku being happy to meet another person with a mutation quirk. Suyu then asked Izuku how he was able to swim so well, considering that he was a Dimetrodon and didn't know Dimetrodons could swim. Izuku then just replied by writing in the sand, saying that he was not a regular Dimetrodon. Suyu and Izuku seemed to get along rather well, and Uraraka commented on saying it makes sense that they got along so well since they were part of the same family, them both being reptiles. Izuku and Suyu began to sort of laugh at that. Well, for Izuku, it was more along the lines of rapid-fire low growling. Suyu then explained that she was an amphibian and Izuku was a reptile, with them also saying that it's common for that people get the two mixed up for being the same thing. It was then that Suyu's family came over to introduce themselves to the group, and Suyu's two siblings immediately took a liking to Izuku, because remember, kids like dinosaurs. Izuku is literally a dinosaur. It was then that Suyu's younger sister Satsuki pulled out a laser pointer from who knows where and began shining it around, trying to see if Izuku would chase it. Not realize with Suyu kind of thinking to herself that it's totally not going to work, considering he's a human that looks like a Dimetrodon. But surprisingly, it started working, and it was hilarious to watch. She made Izuku jump into the water, to which he came out, walked over to Satsuki, and just let water fall out of his mouth on the top of her head, before he then walked over and sat down. Katsuki began laughing at Izuku, which then resulted in Izuku tackling Katsuki, and the two of them began wrestling in a rather cartoonish fashion, with even a cloud of dust surrounding them. Eventually, Uraraka told the two to stop, and when they did, they bore witness to Katsuki biting Izuku's leg, or back leg, while Izuku was biting Katsuki's arm, with not really doing much because it was also healing Katsuki at the same time. The two separated, but not before Izuku slapped Katsuki on the top of the head with his tail, sending Katsuki's body halfway into the sand below. Eventually, the day had come to an end, but the five of them were happy that they got to know each other, and Satsuki was not even at all phased by getting pretty much what is essentially hit by a waterfall of water from Mizuku's mouth. Now all they had to do was wait for when it was time to go to UA for the first time. And that is where we will end part 1, or technically I guess this would be part 2, of What If Deku was a Dimetrodon.